When the waitress daughter finally spoke Japanese, the dinner's shocking truth was exposed. The air in the small town of Maplewood was thick with something more sinister than just the smell of fried food. People whispered. Plates clinked nervously. No one could shake the feeling that something was coming to light, something so outrageous it had the power to unravel their tight-knit community. It all centered around Annie, the waitress with the warm smile and tired eyes, who worked at the Golden Spoon for over a decade. It had been just another busy Friday night, but the usual chatter faded into an eerie silence when Annie's daughter, Mia, unexpectedly spoke in fluent Japanese after years of silence. 1 second, the family was enjoying their meal, and the next, gasps echoed around the room as Mia, a petite girl with unruly curls, dropped her fork. Her eyes glimmered with a strange intensity, as if she had just unlocked a hidden door inside herself. She declared, her tone trembling but loud enough for all to hear. My mother is lying. The room fell into a collective hush. Forks hung in midair, food forgotten. Annie's face turned white, lips quivering. Chatter erupted as the shocking revelation crashed into everyone like a thunderclap. What could she possibly mean? The air was charged with an electric tension as eyes darted around, seeking answers, or perhaps fearing the truth that lay ahead. Murmurs broke out. Is this some kind of joke? Someone wondered aloud, while Aunt Marge clutched her pearls, eyes wide in horror. The nearby couple, Joe and Beth, exchanged glances, their mouths agape, unsure whether to laugh or scream. Silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, before the waitress finally spoke. A single tear rolled down her cheek, a stark contrast to her usually composed demeanor. What truth did Mia uncover that night? Curiosity rippled through the diner as patrons strained to hear every word, tension escalating like a shaken soda bottle ready to explode. Before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Annie tried to regain control, but her voice was shaky, strained under the weight of the moment. Mia, please, she rasped, but it was too late. The night spiraled into chaos as people leaned in, hungry for the truth, hungry for the story that twisted beneath layers of lies. What else does she know? Whispered someone from the back. Just when it seemed everything was about to unravel, Mia turned to her mother with fierce determination. People need to know, Mom, she cried. Outside, the townspeople began to gather, drawn by a curiosity that crackled like electricity in the air. Lights from passing cars illuminated the diner, casting long shadows inside as the tension thickened like fog. Just then, a sudden crash from the back of the diner jolted everyone. What was happening? Eyes widened with shock, dread constricting their hearts. The truth was looming, just beyond their reach, waiting to be uncovered. Would anyone dare to face it? The sudden crash echoed like a gunshot, forcing all eyes to the kitchen door. A figure stumbled out, their face bruised by fear and disbelief. It was old Mr. Thompson, the town's grumpy mechanic. He had been slipping out back to avoid the noise, but now, he stood there, disheveled, his eyes wide and frantic. I heard what she said, he cried, breaths coming in quick, sharp gasps. The crowd murmured, confusion painting their expressions. Annie, frozen in place, felt her heart race. This wasn't the kind of attention she wanted. The spirit of her daughter, the fragile truth unspooling like a thread from a worn-out fabric spun from lies. Mia's gaze fixed on Mr. Thompson, apprehension morphing into an urgency that electrified every nerve in the diner. What do you mean you heard? She pressed, stepping closer, her tiny frame a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around them. I didn't just hear it. I was back there. With your mother? He stammered, his voice trembling. Whispers surged through the tables like rippling waves. Annie clamped down on her jaw, 1,000 thoughts screaming in her head as if battling for control. Stop! Annie shouted, her voice ringing through the dim light. cutting through the noise, yet it filled with desperation. "Mr. Thompson, you don't know, but it was too late." All the eyes that had darted toward him now turned back to the waitress. There was an energy in the room, building, shifting like a raging storm. "Mia, we need to." Annie started, but the words fell flat. The disbelief washed over her like a tide, drowning her reason. "Tell us the truth." Someone finally shouted from the back, emboldened by the atmosphere thick with anxiety. It was Sarah, a local teacher known for her strong opinions and kinder heart. Now, she stood tense, a blend of fear and excitement in her demeanor. "What is going on? What does she mean? She is not the daughter you think she is," Mr. Thompson yelled, spitting out the words like slashed confessions. Gasps filled the air, choking all clarity. "Annie, you can't keep this from everyone anymore." Before Annie could even respond, Mia stepped forward, her voice firm and steady. "Mom, you need to tell them," she implored, her innocence masked by undeniable strength. "They deserve to know the truth." The tables creaked under the weight of the gathered crowd, shifting closer, leaning in like moths to a flame. Tension crackled, tight as a drawn bowstring. The open air outside, once filled with the sounds of Maplewood's nightlife, felt distant and muted, as if the world had paused to eavesdrop on this crucial moment. Annie's heart raced. The truth waited like a predator lurking in the shadows just beyond her lips. She opened her mouth, emotions swirling inside her like a raging ocean. What would she say? How would they react? And then the unthinkable happened. Just outside the diner, a siren wailed, slicing through the silence with chilling urgency. Headlights swept across the diner, sweeping frantic shadows against crowded faces. Panic surged among the patrons as they turned to stare out the window, fear etching deeper lines into foreheads. "What have you brought upon us?" someone whispered, eyes wide with looming dread. Annie's breath hitched. She felt trapped, cornered by the inevitable truth that had been defining her life for too long. Whatever came next would change everything. And just as the diner's door swung wide, bursting open with a gust of cold night air, a figure emerged silhouetted against the harsh lights, a law officer, his face concealed but unmistakable in the authority he exuded. "Annie," the officer shouted, voice rising over the clamor. "We need to talk about Mia." What had Mia uncovered? And who was truly waiting in the shadows of Maplewood? Annie's heart sank as the words hung in the air like a guillotine blade, poised to drop. The crowd's collective gasp shattered the tension into jagged pieces, each patron's face morphing from confusion to fear, curiosity igniting a firestorm of whispers. She suddenly felt exposed, like a deer caught in headlights, her daughter the target of scrutiny unfairly placed on her. "Officer, you can't just burst in here." Annie's voice trembled, desperately grappling for control. The slight tremor in her hands belied her steely exterior. "We're in the middle of Annie," he interrupted sharply, stepping forward, urgency radiating from his body. "You need to listen to me. Your daughter is in danger." Mia's eyes widened. "Danger? What do you mean?" The little girl turned to Annie, her innocence shining through the fog of chaos. "Mom, what is happening?" Annie clenched her fists, her mind racing. "It's going to be okay, honey," she lied, a smile barely masking her panic. But the officer's eyes hardened, glancing nervously back at the crowd, sensing the encroaching tension flooding the room. "You need to tell them everything. It's not safe right now." His voice was softer now, a thread of empathy woven through his authoritative tone. "Everything," Annie echoed, feeling nausea twist in her stomach. She stared helplessly into Mia's trusting eyes, knowing the truth could unravel their world. She could already see the doubt creeping in, the crowd splitting in anxious anticipation like the Red Sea before a storm. "I'll find out anyway, Mom," Mia said, her voice rising, heavy with determination. "Just tell me." Annie's breath hitched, sharp as glass shards. The glassy reflection of her daughter seemed to blur as tears threatened to cascade. What had she been protecting Mia from? The monster emerged slowly from the shadows of her past, poised to devour everything she held dear. Suddenly, the officer pulled out a crumpled flyer from his back pocket, flimsy paper now filled with details that could shred the thin veil of safety that Annie had draped over Mia all these years. "This was found near the old mill. It's about your ex, Annie. Someone has been looking for you, both of you." Annie's heart raced. Memories surged back, his contemptuous threats, the pulsating fear that had driven her to thrive in secrecy. What do you mean? He's gone. I left him behind. A flicker of skepticism crossed the officer's face. You should have known he wouldn't stay gone. He's resurfaced, and he won't stop until he finds you. We have to move fast. The edges of the diner began to blur, the anxious murmurs surrounding them fading into an ominous silence. Annie felt her world tilting, gravity pulling her thoughts into a dark abyss. The weight of countless unspoken words about Mia's father surged, smothering her. Why didn't you tell me? Mia's voice cracked, a fresh wave of hurt coursing through her. She was no longer just the innocent daughter. She was a vessel for truth that echoed in a hollow chamber of fear. I was trying to keep you safe. Annie gasped, feeling the cascading grip of revelations threaten to surface. Each word pulled her deeper into the weight of her lies. Just as the truth threatened to spill, the back door creaked open, revealing another shadow, a tall figure, cloaked in dark intentions. The air thickened as the diner's lights flickered ominously, illuminating the intruder's menacing grin. Now the fun begins, he said, his voice smooth like ice, piercing through the tension as a chill cascaded down Annie's spine. Annie's heart pounded as she instinctively shielded Mia, praying that love could offer protection from the encroaching storm. The crowd recoiled, eyes darting, minds racing. Who are you? The officer demanded, positioning himself between the figure and the frightened families, fists clenched, adrenaline coursing through his veins. But the weight that stretched between past and present threatened to snap. Would the truth finally surface? Or would the shadows consume them all? As the intruder stepped closer, Annie was left to wonder. What had she really brought upon them all? Annie's breath quickened as the intruder strode forward, his presence heavy with intent. The diner seemed to shrink around them, walls pulsating with the strained atmosphere. The officer, a protective barrier, seemed even smaller against this looming shadow that whispered of danger. Step back. The officer barked, eyes narrowed. But the figure laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Annie's spine. Such brave words, he taunted. But we both know how this will end. Annie squeezed Mia's hand tightly, the small warmth anchoring her in this whirlwind of chaos. Don't be scared, sweetheart, she murmured, her heart a drumbeat in her ears. Mia's eyes searched her face, looking for reassurance that felt so flimsy, like a balloon teetering on the edge of popping. Who sent you? The officer demanded again, voice steady but laced with tension. Oh, I'm just a messenger. The intruder's grin widened, a flash of white teeth stark against his dark attire. Your precious secrets have a way of coming back, don't they, Annie? He leaned in closer, an unnatural intimacy fanning the panic in the air. After all, you're still a part of his game. The crowd gasped, a ripple of dread spreading through the room. Faces twisted in confusion and fear, each person now fully aware that the air had shifted forever. Annie glanced around, feeling like the last stable boat in a raging sea. No, she whispered, the word barely escaping her lips. How was this happening? Hadn't she severed all ties? You thought running away would help. But there's no escaping your past. Not when he's hunting you down like prey. The man's voice dripped with mockery, his words curling around her like smoke, suffocating and inescapable. Please, just leave us alone. Annie's voice was stronger now. Desperation mingled with fury. Protecting Mia was non-negotiable. You don't have to do this. The intruder laughed again, shaking his head with an exaggerated pity. Oh, but I do. You exposed him, Annie. You made him weak, and that made you a target. Remember when he told you that no one leaves him? Mia glanced up, her brow furrowed with worry. Mom, what is he talking about? Annie's heart shattered at her daughter's innocence. How could she explain the past, the monster lurking behind their peaceful facade? No, sweetie, it's just before she could finish, the officer lunged forward. But the man was quick, slipping to the side, his hand darting into his pocket. Annie's stomach dropped, panic coursing through her veins as she realized he wasn't just a messenger. He was a threat, and he had something. Stop! The officer shouted, but the world swirled in a blur of movement. In an instant, a gun emerged, glimmering ominously under the diner's fluorescent lights. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Fear twisted every face into masks of horror. Annie froze, her heart racing against the confines of her chest. I only need a moment to remind you of who you really are, Annie, he sneered, lifting the weapon, fingers steady against the metal's cold surface. Tell your daughter why he's coming for you, because it might just save her life. Terror billowed within Annie, the weight of her choices, her silence, all crashing down on her. What had she kept hidden? What secrets lay buried in the shadows of their past that could now rip apart their fragile safety? Mia, she started, but in that moment of desperate honesty, the lights flickered again and the sound of shattering glass echoed through the diner, followed by a scream. Who had come to their aid? Annie's heart raced with hope mingled with dread. Would this be their salvation or the push into greater darkness? The line between rescue and betrayal blurred as she staggered forward, ready to confront whatever came next. As the figure reeled from the chaos, his demeanor shifted. You're not safe until you face the truth, he spat, before glancing back at the entrance, his eyes wide with sudden uncertainty. Annie's mind raced. Was this the moment where everything would come crashing down, or a chance for redemption? When she caught sight of the large silhouette rushing through the door, she realized the nightmare was far from over, and the real battle was about to commence. The explosion of shattering glass was like a thunderclap in the small diner. Annie's adrenaline surged, her mind whirred with chaotic thoughts. Who had burst in? A friend? Or a more dangerous adversary? The intruder turned, his expression morphing from confident menace to a flicker of surprise. It was as if the past had materialized, bringing a whirlwind of implications along with it. Annie's heart raced. She had little time to decipher the situation. Just then, the silhouette became clearer, a man clad in a dark jacket, face partially obscured. Shadows danced across the diner as he stepped fully into the light. Get down, he shouted, the urgency in his voice slicing through the tension like a knife. Annie reacted instinctively. She crouched low, pulling Mia close, shielding her against the chill of fear that seeped through the air. The officer followed suit, putting himself between them and the gunman. But the intruder laughed again, a sound that chilled Annie's blood. More players in this game, I see, he sneered, his eyes darting, calculating, hungry. But you're too late. The stakes are higher than you know. Before she could catch her breath, the man in the jacket lunged at the intruder. The two men grappled, a violent ballet amidst the diner's once peaceful atmosphere. Chairs toppled over as patrons scrambled, some screaming, others frozen in stunned silence. Annie couldn't tear her gaze away from the fight. The intruder seemed stronger, and for a moment, the panic surged anew in her chest. But then she glimpsed something, a glint of metal as the officer reached for his weapon, ready to intervene. Don't shoot, Annie yelled, her voice ringing out, filled with desperation. We don't know who that is yet. The officer hesitated, eyes darting between the combatants and Annie, unsure. Suddenly, the intruder managed to push the other man back, creating space. His gaze fell on Annie once more, full of disdain. You think you can hide? You think a new face will save you? He spat, his voice a viper's hiss. Mia, stay behind me. Annie hissed, adrenaline pumping through her, a lifeline of determination. The truth was crashing down like a tidal wave. She couldn't protect Mia with silence any longer. She needed to confront the past. But how? Waves of noise surged through the diner, the irate shouts, the distressed sobs, the chaos echoing against the linoleum floors. Just then, the stranger spoke again, rising to his feet with an intense glare. I came because I knew you'd need help, Annie. We can't run away from this. You have to face him, and your choice affects more than just you now. Mia's small voice quivered, breaking through the chaos. Mom, who is he? Annie's heart twisted. This was the moment where her daughter must confront the reality she kept hidden. Mia, she began, but the tension was palpable. Before she could find the right words, the intruder cut in sharply. Enough? Stop hiding in the shadows, Annie. You're the only one who can end this. He won't stop. None of us will be safe until you do. Clarity hit hard. The truth, the pain of her past, rang louder than the chaos swirling around her. Tears pricked her eyes as she realized that it was no longer just her fight. It was Mia's too. The unspoken secrets could no longer suffocate her. But as the officer took a step forward, the intruder's laughter echoed again. You think this is just about you? The game is much bigger, and you're merely a pawn. Welcome back to the board. Annie's breath caught in her throat. The stakes were higher than she'd ever imagined. With the weight of responsibility crashing down, she knew she had to act fast. But as the sirens wailed outside, another truth unfolded. Someone was waiting for the right moment to strike. What had she truly unleashed? As the two men clashed again, she felt the ground shifting beneath her, and the looming question hovered in the air: was she ready to face the shadows of her past, or had she just awakened them? Annie's heart thudded in her chest, each beat a reminder of the precarious situation they were caught in. The chaos around them spiraled, a whirlwind of fear and uncertainty. She glanced at Mia, whose wide eyes reflected terror, but also a flicker of courage. That shimmer filled Annie with a sense of urgency. They needed a plan. The two men continued to grapple violently. The officer attempted to gain control without harming anyone, but the unpredictability of the intruder's movements made it impossible. Chairs clattered, and the clinking of glass on the floor might have been a music video of madness. It made Annie's teeth chatter. She took a breath, the air thick with smoke and the metallic tang of danger. "You can't fight forever," she shouted, desperation threading through her words. The intruder's smirk twisted her gut. He thrived on danger, on the dance of violence. She needed to disrupt that rhythm. "Mia, stay hidden," she yelled as she gripped the edge of the counter, her knuckles whitening. She looked to the officer, who was still hesitating. "You can't let this escalate." The officer's gun was steady, his heartbeat echoing loudly in the din of pandemonium. The urgency in Annie's voice finally broke through. "Trust me. You need to know the truth." The intruder froze, eyes narrowing. "Truth? What do you know about truth, Annie?" His voice dripped mockery. "What I know is that you think I'm afraid of you." She spat back, adrenaline sharpening her focus. "But look closer. This is bigger than your petty games." The man in the dark jacket, momentarily distracted, seized the opportunity to drive a fist into the intruder's ribs. Elvis, the waitress, who had been huddled in the corner, whispered prayers. Annie stole a glance at her, remembering how they had bonded over shared laughter and dreams of bigger things. Suddenly, a loud crash erupted from the kitchen. The back door swung open, and a shadowy figure appeared, silhouetted against the light streaming in. The diner's room shifted, the tension thickening like fog. "Is everyone okay?" the newcomer yelled, rushing toward them with a determined look. "I heard the commotion." Annie squinted, heart racing. Was it help or more trouble? But as the figure stepped into the diner, recognition jolted through Annie like electricity. It was Greg, their old friend, the one who had disappeared into the night 2 years ago, tangled up in a mess of secrets and choices that Annie had thought were buried for good. "Mia," Greg shouted, rushing forward. But instantly the intruder's gaze snapped to him, fierce and unyielding. "You," he hissed, recognizing the danger in Greg's arrival. "You're too late. This ends tonight." Annie's breath hitched. Time seemed to freeze. Would Greg's return shift the balance? Would it send them spiraling back into the mess they'd fought so hard to escape? "Annie," Greg called urgently, panic twisting his voice. "We need to." The intruder lunged for him. But before he could make contact, Mia stepped away from the safety of her mother. "Stop," she shouted, a small but fiery voice piercing the cacophony. All eyes turned to her, shock rippling through the diner. Annie felt an icy grip on her heart. "Mia," she gasped, barely able to comprehend what was happening. What happened if her daughter intervened? "What are you doing?" Annie pleaded, her own fear ebbing for a moment, replaced by a fierce protection as her daughter faced the chaos armed with nothing but bravery. "I won't let you hurt anyone. I don't care who you are. You can't keep running away." Mia's declaration rang out, defiant. The intruder pivoted, momentarily distracted by this small but mighty voice. His demeanor shifted, interest flickering in his eyes. Annie's realization struck like a thunderbolt. Her daughter was not just a witness, she was a key player. But with every revelation, the sirens outside grew louder, the world inching ever closer. And as the tension thickened in that cramped diner, one question loomed above all else. Was Mia prepared to confront a truth she had no understanding of, or would innocence be further fractured? In the chaos that was about to unfold, Annie's heart raced, teetering on the brink of hope and despair. What had she unleashed? And was this the moment they would either claim their freedom or be crushed by the weight of their past? The intruder's eyes narrowed, the fleeting interest in Mia evaporating into cold disdain. You think you can stop me, little girl? He sneered, his voice laced with venom. He stepped toward her, fingers curling into fists, but Greg leapt forward, placing himself in the line of fire. Don't! Greg shouted, sheer desperation raising his voice above the chaos. Mia, back away. Please. His own fear spilled over, raw and contagious. Annie felt her heart lurch. Greg had always been reckless, always diving headfirst into trouble. But this time, his courage felt like a desperate grasp at a sinking ship. Get out of the way, Greg, she cried, urgency flaring in her chest. Silence fell, heavy with disbelief. The officer, gun still drawn, was frozen between orders and desperation. Tension coiled within the diner like a spring ready to snap. Mia stood her ground, her small frame radiating determination. I won't let you hurt anyone, she repeated, this time louder, casting a wild glance at Annie. Annie's world narrowed around her daughter. Mia, you're not ready for this. The crowd behind her remained paralyzed, some with mouths agape, others whispering uncertain prayers. Without warning, the intruder lunged for Greg, rage etched across his face. The scuffle resumed, chairs again scraping against the linoleum as Greg attempted to buy them time, grappling with the intruder. Get down, Greg yelled, urgency in his voice, and suddenly, the chaos erupted once more. Annie barely registered the movement, her instinct to protect taking over. She rushed forward, but the officer was already in a blur of motion, trying to split the two men apart that a cacophony of shouts drowned out her thoughts. Mia was caught in the storm between danger and courage, eyes flickering from the fighting men to her mother, begging for assurance. Stay back, the officer shouted at Mia as the struggle deepened, the chaotic mess almost too much to bear. Glass shattered somewhere behind them, and panic surged in Annie's chest. Mia, please listen, she pleaded, reaching out in a moment of desperate clarity. You don't know what you're getting into. But Mia's spirit couldn't be dimmed. I'm not afraid of him. Not anymore. Tears sparkled in her eyes, but determination hardened her chin. Annie could barely breathe. The image of her little girl, already growing up too fast, facing a brutal world was unbearable, but in an instant. The intruder seized Greg by the collar, slamming him against the counter. You think you're the hero here? He spat, the contempt evident. All of you are just pieces on the board, waiting to be knocked down. Annie felt time slow. The world outside blurred into insignificance as she plunged forward, heart racing. Stop. Just stop. This isn't the way, she screamed, hoping her voice could pierce through the chaos. Then, in a shocking twist, Mia stepped closer. You have no idea what we're capable of, she shouted, stepping into the spotlight of fear, defiance igniting her small frame. It was a line drawn in the sand. The diner, once a backdrop of mundane daily life, had morphed into a battlefield. The intruder turned, caught off guard. What did you just say? His sneer faltered, voice laced with uncertainty. Annie froze, questions whirling through her head. What did Mia mean? Why was she pushing this confrontation? A single thought gripped her, tighter than any fear. Don't say anything more, Mia, she gasped, panic clawing at her voice. But her daughter's expression revealed something deeper. Chess pieces shifted on a chaotic board, revealing strings that pulled at the very essence of their tangled past. Mia, please. Greg fought for breath, his voice raw. Suddenly, the distant wail of sirens grew louder, a grim reminder that this confrontation had a clock ticking down to its inevitable conclusion. Mia, what are you doing? Annie's voice had turned to a whisper, heavy with dread. The panic in the diner shifted, the edges of reality fraying within the storm of emotions. Where would this new boldness take them? What awaited behind the facade of silence, anticipated by both darkness and light? As silence fell and all eyes turned to Mia, trembling breaths were held. In that moment, a decision was due, a revelation waiting to shatter everything they thought they knew. What further complications awaited as Mia stepped closer to the brink of a dark truth? And could they escape the consequences of her brave defiance? The diner was a storm. Tension crackled in the air as everyone, frozen like a tableau, awaited the aftermath of Mia's bold declaration. Greg struggled in the intruder's grasp, his eyes darting between Mia and Annie, searching for an answer that wasn't there. "Tell me what you mean," the intruder demanded, his voice low and threatening. "You think you have some hidden power?" He tightened his grip on Greg, shaking him slightly. "You're just a little girl playing at bravery." Annie felt the color drain from her face. Her breath hitched in her throat. "Mia, don't," she began. But the words fell away as Mia stepped even closer, her small figure defiantly swaying with fierce energy. "I am not afraid of you," Mia shouted, her voice trembling but strong. "You hurt people, but we can fight back. We know things. We'll show you." Gasps erupted from the crowd, and the sound of a chair scraping back echoed ominously in the stillness. They were captivated, horrified, and mesmerized by the girl who stood unflinchingly against a grown man consumed by rage. "What do you think you know?" the intruder retorted, hesitation creeping into his voice now. "You think because you've learned a few words, you can challenge me? Your words mean nothing. You're still just a child." Annie felt her pulse quicken, panic clawing at her insides. "Mia, get behind me," she shouted, instinct burning in her veins. But Mia didn't budge. She took a brave step forward, grounding herself. "I don't need to be behind you," she countered, her chin lifted high. "I can stand on my own." For a heartbeat, the diner seemed to hold its breath. Then, the sirens wailed even closer, a dark omen pushing reality closer to the brink. The police had to arrive soon, but would there be anything left of them to save when they did? "You think they'll protect you?" The intruder laughed darkly. "They'd rather cover their own backs than help little girls in need. You're just a pawn." Annie's heart pounded heavily in her chest as she desperately searched for a tactic. The words that poured from Mia hung like a fragile thread in the air. What deep knowledge had her daughter stumbled upon? And just then, Mia took a breath and began to speak. Each syllable rolled off her tongue softly at first, but then her voice grew. "Izay comb," she intoned, the rhythm of her speech sending shivers down Annie's spine. The language flowed out, a cascade of syllables both strange and foreign. "What?" The intruder's arrogance evaporated momentarily, his brow furrowing. "What are you?" Annie's eyes widened. "Mia, stop, please." Panic clawed at her throat. But Mia continued, her words rising into a fierce crescendo. She was calling something forth, something buried, something ancient that no one understood. The smell of fear in the air turned thick as gasps rippled through the crowd. The policeman, finally breaking from his stupor, brought his weapon to bear, yelling at the intruder to stand down. But in that moment, distraction rippled through, the crowd as fear, curiosity, and brimming adrenaline coalescing into a force that was palpable. "Mia, come back," cried Annie, terror suffocating her voice. Then the unexpected happened. The intruder faltered, eyes flickering toward Mia as questions swirled in his mind, fear intertwined with disbelief. For the first time, he hesitated. With that singular moment hanging heavy in the air, the very foundation of the conflict shifted. And Annie could see it, that sliver of a chance, a moment where the tide might turn. But would they take this chance, or allow themselves to be swept away in a storm of chaos and violence that loomed large? As Mia finished her declaration, the diner pulsed with an electricity that could ignite or extinguish everything. What lay ahead in the shadows of secrets? And could an unspoken language really shift the balance of power? The diner held its collective breath, torn between fear and hope, waiting for the intruder's response. And the next heartbeat would change everything. Mia's voice faded, leaving an eerie silence that wrapped around the diner like a thick fog. Eyes darted between her and the intruder, who stood frozen, seemingly trying to unravel what had just been unleashed. The air felt electrified, charged with something primal coming alive, and everyone held their breath in shared anxiety. "What did you just say?" The intruder breathed, his bravado faltering as he took a cautious step back. There was something in Mia's words, something he didn't understand, and it disturbed him in ways he couldn't articulate. The grip on Greg loosened slightly, though the threat still lingered. Annie felt her heart race, thumping painfully against her ribs. This was a moment to capitalize on, a moment she could not afford to waste. "Mia, keep going. Whatever you just did, it shook him," she yelled, desperate for her daughter to continue. But Mia's tiny frame trembled. Doubt flickered in her eyes, battling the courage she had just summoned. I don't know what I'm doing," she said, her voice trembling now. A murmur surged through the crowd, a collective gasp, as they absorbed her uncertainty. "Keep speaking," Greg called out, his voice strained but strong, fighting through fear. The intruder tightened his grip again, but now his eyes flickered with uncertainty, his earlier bravado diminishing in the face of Mia's unexpected strength. "I don't understand," he yelled, the raw irritation in his voice belying his fear. "You think you can control me with a few words? I've seen things you can't even begin to imagine. Then let me show you something," Mia shouted, a flicker of determination grabbing hold of her again. She turned her gaze back to the crowd, as if beckoning them into her growing confidence. "We are not alone. We are never alone. Those words, they're ancient. You can't just say them," the intruder insisted, his face twisting in a mask of confusion and apprehension. The room felt charged, as though the very walls of the diner were closing in, reverberating with the budding power coursing through Mia. The waitress, long forgotten in the chaos, stepped forward, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "Those words, they call forth the spirits," she warned softly, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and awe. "It's Japanese, but different. It belongs to a time when we honored what we could not see." Greg turned his head slightly, the confusion clouding his expression darkening. "What does that mean? Jurisdiction? Wealth? Power?" Each word dripped with sarcasm and defiance. The intruder looked at the waitress, then at Mia, his jaw tightening in frustration. "You think some ancient words will save you?" he spat. But the bravado felt thin, almost like a facade crumbling under the weight of something heavier. The sirens blared louder, piercing the tension, announcing the arrival of the police. The threat of authority was near, yet the real battle loomed larger in that diner, an existential battle far deeper than any gun or badge could reach. Everyone sensed it, the clash of raw, untapped potential against the darkness imploding on itself. Annie's heart raced as she prepared to charge. "Mia, just breathe. You have the strength," she began, but was cut short by a loud crash outside the diner. The door burst open, slamming against the wall as several police officers stormed in, weapons drawn. "Everyone down. Now," one officer barked, scanning the room for the source of the chaos. In that split second, three forces collided. Universal power, the weight of authority, and the gripping force of unraveling fear. Mia cast a glance at the intruder, whose expression shifted from rage to horror as realization dawned on him. Annie's breath caught. Was this the end, or merely the beginning of something far more menacing? In that moment of heightened pandemonium, Mia clenched her fists, words bubbling in her throat. The diner's fate hinged on a single second, marked by her next utterance. Could a child's voice truly summon what lurked in the shadows? Or would it only strengthen the intruder's resolve? Outside, shadows gathered, awaiting the fallout. Mia held her breath, heart pounding like a drum. She was standing on the edge of something wild, something that could pull them all into darkness or lead them to a flicker of light. The air between her and the intruder crackled like lightning, filled with tension and fear. Everyone was waiting, their eyes wide and breath held, ready to see if she could conjure a power that transcended the chaos. "Mia," Annie urged, a wild desperation in her voice as she crouched low to shield her daughter. "Just breathe. You don't have to do this alone." But Mia's determination burned bright, a flame igniting against the cold chill of terror surrounding them. The intruder's face twisted in a sneer. "You're just a little girl. You think your words can save you?" Mia's eyes narrowed, fueled by something deeper, an ancient knowledge awakening like an ocean tide. "I know my truth," she declared, her voice strong as she pushed forward. "You can't scare me anymore. You're the one trapped in your own darkness." The confidence radiated between them, shifting the weight of the atmosphere in the diner. The officer stepped closer, his gaze darting nervously between the chaos and the intruder. "Put the gun down," he demanded. "This doesn't need to end in bloodshed." But he only laughed, a hollow echo that sent a chill through the crowd. "You don't control this. You have no authority here." In that moment, Mia clenched her fists tighter, pushing through her fears as she channeled her voice into a resonant echo of ancient words. We are not alone. She cried out once more, letting the power of her truth wash over the diner, pulling at the invisible strands of connection that bound them all together. The patrons shifted, the tension spiraling into something tangible. They were no longer isolated. They were a collective unified by courage. Annie felt it coiling around her, lifting her spirit to fight back alongside her daughter. "We are together," she shouted, rallying beside Mia as they stood defiantly against the intruder. The intruder faltered, an eerie uncertainty vibrating in the air. "No, you're not real." His voice wavered as anger flashed in his eyes. Panic surged beneath the surface of his bravado, and for a second, it was as if the cracks were beginning to show. And just then, the sirens grew louder, wailing a haunting melody of justice approaching. Outside, chaos reigned, lights flickering, shadows rushing in. Annie squeezed Mia's hand, grounding her in that reality. "You're right, sweetheart. We aren't alone," she whispered fiercely, amplifying the fire in her daughter's voice. Together, they echoed, filling the diner with their combined strength. The intruder's eyes widened as the power of their unity washed over him. For a fleeting moment, it looked like the darkness might retreat, overshadowed by the light of collective hope and determination. Mia's determination shook the foundation of the moment. "We expose your lies," she shouted, her voice steady as it rolled across the room like a wave, pushing against the intruder's facade. The diner's energy shifted, building to a crescendo of courage that reached from the back of the room to the front, empowering each soul present. And in that moment of truth, Annie could finally see. Mia was not only her daughter. She was a force of nature, a catalyst for change. The tension snapped like a rubber band. The intruder's expression twisted into defeat as the sound of police officers burst through the diner door. "Drop the weapon," they commanded, their voices cutting sharply through the chaos. With one last cursed glance, the intruder hesitated, fearing what was behind him more than the unity before him. It was a moment of desperation. He knew the walls were closing in, and the shadows he once commanded were fading. "No," he spat, fear creeping into his voice as he dropped the gun and bolted for the back exit, the realization crashing that he was no longer in control. The officer chased him, pursuing the darkness that had haunted Annie for far too long. Breathless, Annie turned to Mia, pulling her into a fierce embrace. "You did it. Oh my God, you shone." Tears of relief mingled with pride as she held her daughter close. The little girl who had not only faced her fears, but had chiseled light into their shadows. The crowd erupted into cheers, gasping, laughing. A wild concoction of disbelief and jubilation filled the room as the weight of the past crumbled beneath their feet. As sirens faded, the patrons emerged from their stupor in disbelief, witnessing the born fearlessness of a child. In that diner, they found a sense of community, tied by the thread of shared experience and resilience. "From now on, we'll speak our truths," the waitress shouted, wiping her tears, stepping forward, emboldened. Annie smiled, looking around at the faces filled with gratitude and unity stitched from the severed threads of fear. "Yes, we will," she declared, strong and resolute. And as the last remnants of the past began to dissolve into the night, Annie realized they were not only leaving chaos behind. They were stepping into the light, their voices strong, their hearts unbreakable. It was a new beginning. The air was lighter now, the dark clouds finally dispersing, as laughter filled the diner, a celebration of resilience, truth, and connection. And as the lights flickered overhead, the families and friends began to gather around Mia and Annie, a family forged through fire, no longer running from their truth, but embracing it, ready to face whatever the future held. Now, this is the moment for you, dear friend. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now and feed the algorithm like it deserves. Your voice matters, so flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild ending. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who absolutely need to see this conclusion. Your support means everything.